Welcome to Module 4 of the Documentation of Contract Quantities course. We are going to start reviewing material in the Documentation Guide or Doc Guide. Hopefully you've downloaded your Doc Guide in PDF form and can follow along. We're going to begin in Section A. We will start by talking about the project diary and the quantity book. Section A provides the general requirements for the basis of all documentation performed on the IDOT contracts. Here's a copy of the index of Section A. Section A contains things such as the project diary, the quantity book, field inspection source documentation, field books, planned quantity acceptance, progress documentation that also includes estimating, use of computers for final documentation, extra work on our contracts, material allowance, maximum payment, yield checks, thickness determination schedule or depth checks, sidewalk cross slope determinations, documentation of paid quantities based on weight tickets or paid by weight items, and our final documentation. These items are all part of Section A that will be covered in the next several modules of this course. Coming up shortly, we will discuss the project diary and the quantity book in this module. The project diary. In essence, it is a day-to-day record of the events that happen on the job site. Who was there? What did they do? Where were they working? It's a recognized legal document and can be considered the single most important document on your project. It is frequently used to resolve disputes or claims, but it is not a personal diary. Just the facts, please. If your job is in I-Corps or CMMS, you will have an electronic diary, and that shall be the official project diary for your contract. Entries must begin the first day the contractor starts work or the official start date. If you don't have an altered start date in writing, that would be at a minimum 10 days after execution of your contract. Daily entries are required in the project diary until the project is complete or if it is officially suspended. Let's talk about daily diary entries. What is required? You can view the list of required items in the diary by looking on page A4 in the Doc Guide. They include weather, project location specific, also the controlling item. This is the basis for charging working days or workable days. Can the contractor work on the controlling item? And often weather plays a large role in that. We want to record the number of people are working and the hours they work. Should have enough information so that we can make sure they are meeting their DBE requirements. The names of the contractors and their activities on the job site. If we charge any working days or partial fractions of a working day. The general locations of work and which contractors are where. Daily traffic control inspections. These are the drive-through, informally documented traffic control inspections that the engineer's crew will perform in the AM and the PM, typically the first and last duties of the day. Other information that's required in your diary on a daily basis, any discussions that you have with your supervisor, especially if they lead to direction on the project, discussions with the contractor, especially if they result in direction on the contract, any approvals that are verbal by phone call or maybe email for extra work unless they are noted elsewhere, any official visitors and inspections, any important phone calls, faxes if you're still getting them, and emails, openings or closings of detours, any rejected materials or work and the reason for that rejection, if work is shut down or resumed for whatever reason. Other information required in the diary, disputable items of work. Whenever you have railroad flaggers on your contract, you must note that in the diary each day they are present on site. Any delays, the length and cause of those delays, arrival, departure of major equipment such as milling machines, cranes, other large pieces of equipment, any unusual conditions on the job site, specifically if they could be a hindrance to safety or to stopping progress on the contract in the construction. Any discussions regarding safety, any discussions, particularly if they're related to staff and activities and hazards that are on the site, or if you're discussing safety requirements with your contractor. Here's an example on page F1 in your doc guide. That is the back section of the doc guide. It is the I-Corps diary cover sheet. So for all of you local agency folks that are still using I-Corps as your electronic tool, you will have a printed diary cover sheet. Up here we have our contract information. If found, return to. You got to put an address in here. Here we have contact information for the resident and the contractor. Make sure you put the phone numbers in, because if someone finds your diary out on the roadside, chances are not high they're going to mail it to you, but they might give you a phone call and let you know where they put it. Here is a statement: all entries made by the resident unless otherwise noted. This means the resident does not have to sign every day by putting entries in the diary. If it's someone other than the resident, just cross out resident, single line strike, and write in which job title will be maintaining the diary, and then they would sign an initial. At the bottom, you must have handwritten initials for all personnel that inspect work, measure work, calculate quantities, or do checking on calculated quantities. Here's an example diary entry using a manual quantity book. You will not have a manual quantity book if using I-Corps or CMMS. Same type of information. Manual quantity books have some additional rules that you can look up in section A. They must be hardbound books, no spiral bind, no 3-ring binders, because what happens if, say you have to go to court for a claim on your job and there's a page that is mysteriously ripped out of your diary. People think we're hiding things, so we're not allowed to take pages out of the diary. Therefore, it cannot be easily removable, hence the hardbound. Here we have the hours that were worked, we have the weather, controlling item, did we charge or not charge a working day and why, contractors that are on site, what they're working on and their locations. Here we have our traffic control checks. Traffic control was okay at 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Here's the breakdown of the labor crew showing the potential for progress on their production. This is an example of a printed I-Corps daily diary report. This represents one date worth of work, Thursday, July 12th of 2012. The controlling item, how many people were working, the number of hours they worked. Here's the weather. Did we charge a working day or did we track a workable day? Here we can see we didn't charge a working day, but we did track a workable day. So what type of contract would this be? I can't tell from this one, but I can tell you it is not a working day contract because we're tracking workable days. Weekly report paragraph will be an entry that you put in I-Corps trying to summarize the major events of the day, because you can automatically pull up a weekly report in I-Corps and it will contain this text that is entered in that area. The additional paragraphs are room for you to put more details of the day. This weekly report paragraph only has a limited number of characters. You can fill pages and pages in the additional paragraphs if necessary. Here is an example of a CMMS diary entry. This is the web app of CMMS. We're in our project. Here we have the date of this entry. We have the weather, temperature, wind, did it rain and how much. Here we put in the controlling item. Did we charge a working day or track a workable day? Again, this one was tracking workable days, so I know it's not a working day contract. Here we have the contractors that are working, the hours they worked, how many people were working, who created this log, and then a description of what was happening with each contractor. In I-Corps, the diary weekly report is automatically populated. Again, The text that shows up in this box is from that weekly paragraph, and it has a record of days that were workable or working days, the date, day, controlling item. For CMMS, it's a very similar report. It can also be generated with the click of a button. Same type of thing where we have the day of the week, the date, hours worked, what the controlling item, did we charge or track working or workable days, and a summary of what happened for that day. Next, let's talk about the quantity book system. The quantity book collects all of the daily quantities that we are calculating or measuring in the field and stores them in records so that we can keep a tally of the completed quantities to date. This is also where we will reference when we generate our pay estimates. We need a separate quantity book for each contract. Daily quantities posted here will be referred to when each pay estimate is prepared, and it is considered to be the keystone of the complete record-keeping system. We are tracking the quantities on the days, the locations. We also must reference the source documents. Where was the information recorded that substantiates the quantity that's put into this book? Here is the I-Course quantity book title page. Once it's printed out, same type of information. Here we have our contract information, and we've got our contact information for the resident and the contractor. Please found, return to. Hopefully your quantity book is not out in the field with you, particularly if it's an I-Course. This is the index of sheets for I-Course. This one was pre-printed from an I-Course packet and becomes a manual quantity book at that point. We can tell by these last two items were extra work that were added, and they are typed in. They are not in alphanumeric order, whereas if it was in I-Course, it would automatically change this index to include those items. This is a snippet from the index of pages for a quantity book in I-Course. You can see here we have our pay item numbers, and we have our description. We've got our FAS ID codes and what page in the quantity book that represents. Here we have a manual quantity book example on page F7 in the doc guide. Up top, we've got our pay item information with our item number, description. Interestingly, this pay item description ends in a number. Do you remember what it means if a pay item description ends in a number? That means this pavement patch is expected to be 13 inches thick. We've got our fund code, planned quantity, our pay unit or unit of measure is square yards, and we have a contract unit price. Our contract information is up here. Most important piece of information up in that square is what? Contract number. Must be on all of our documentation. Here we have a box for recording our authorizations. If we have extra work that needs performed, we get our authorizations. We can record that information so we can keep our total adjusted quantity up to date, so we know how much we can pay for at the end of this pay item. Down here we have our daily quantity entries. Each line represents 1 day worth of production. Here we have each individual date of production, the relative location, the quantity for this day, and then we keep a running cumulative tally to date completed. Here we get to July 19th of 2016, and we have a total quantity placed of 363.2 square yards. However, our planned quantity was only 327.8. So on the pay estimate on July 19th, I can only pay up to my total adjusted quantity, or 327.8. I did enter an authorization for the additional square yards we needed to bring my total up to what was placed and measured and required in the field. On the next pay estimate, after that authorization is approved, I can then pay the remaining balance of what is due. Here we see the evidence of material inspection that is required. We will get to this evidence of material inspection in just a little bit. Progress documentation shows on each day where I recorded measurements, maybe depth checks, and other supporting documentation that tells somebody else how we got this quantity for that day. When it's final, I can draw the line and I say it's final. We're not going to place any more for this pay item. Page 2 in the manual quantity book would be the right half side. The left side would be our daily entries, and the right hand side is optional for recording our material quantities and our inspections. In the top, if we have paid by weight items, we must collect the scale decal information. Here we have the date on the decal or certification date, the identification number or decal number, and the scale location. Here are the dates of production. We had so many tons of material that were delivered. We keep a running tally to date, and for every so many tons I'm required to have plant reports, tickets, tests, and other QC QA information. I can make sure I'm staying up with the frequency of the testing by looking at the totals that I have over here on the manual quantity book. This side, other than scale decal, is optional for your use only. This is an example of an I-Corps daily quantities report. This represents one line on the quantity book for a specific date. Here we have the date of the work, pay item number, pay item description, quantity, units. Here's the evidence of material inspection that was required that must be documented in the quantity book. Here's our location and the source of progress documentation. That would be our source document. Field book number 3, page 2 tells us how we got this 24.4 square yards. This book should also include any other information required for documentation for this type of pay item. On page F10 in the doc guide is an example of an I-Corps quantity book page for a specific pay item. Here's my pay item number and my description, and it would include all of the daily entries printed for this pay item. This represents a CMMS quantity book page, all electronic in the app, and we can see each one of these lines is a different day's entry for this particular pay item. Very similar to the I-Corps, just a different presentation.